Hello and welcome back to Using Arrays in List 2, where we're kind of working with a form to find out an average for our grades. But now we're going to focus on using the lists and arrays to try to expand it. Last time was a little bit of an undertaking. So some of you might have thought, well, this is turning into something big. Some of you may have thought, well, this isn't something I don't know if I'm ready to do yet. Hopefully some of you thought it was pretty cool because if you think about it, this can not just be used for grades. This can be used for a lot of things. You know, you could do a budget with something like this, or like if you had a baseball team, you could figure out the averages for all the batters on the baseball team, things like that. This can actually expand or have the ability to do a lot of other things other than grade. But I understand that it's a lot. And in fact, if you look at that last video, we really didn't do much with arrays, right? We just reassembled this to kind of set it up. But now we're ready to do it. And before we put the cart before the horse, why don't we just step back and just do something extremely simple for something like this? We are not going to look at anything from here to here today. We're not going to worry about that because that's going to be a little bit more advanced. We're going to use the test and the homework, but we're not going to add anything to it yet. And I'm going to move this guy over here. We are going to just use the compute button and the grade. So we're going to allow ourselves to put a grade in, and I think we'll just focus on tests this time. Okay. So essentially it's going to do exactly what we did last time, but we're going to do it with arrays, and then we'll see how that can flourish later and open things up. And I said in the last video that we use the compute every time we put something in here. So in other words, if I get a 75 on the first test, I put it in here, hit compute. 75 on the second test, hit compute. Hit 85 on the third test, hit compute. I like that from a designer standpoint just because it simplifies the number of buttons there and it keeps things a little bit more simple. Some people would prefer to put another button right here and say update or something like that. Either way, it's fine. In the end, you kind of have to justify it. This isn't really a UX, UI course. We're going to think about those things, but at this point, that's a little bit more of an advanced topic in that situation. So let's just go into the compute section. And remember last time we had some tests, and we're going to average the tests, and then we had all this good stuff in here. Well, we can still do that, but let's do one as a list. So if I type in list, and then I'll keep it as a double. Right, we made it a double last time, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to say list double, and it's waiting for me to give it a name. I'm going to call it tests. Or maybe just test, that's fine. And then we're going to set it equal to a new list. And, oh, it already put the double in there. That's nice. And then we're going to put in just that. And that should be all that we need at this point. Now here's the rub. Every time you hit button compute click, it's going to come into here and it's going to create a new list. So technically this isn't the best place to put it. Let's instead take this out and put it in here. I'd call this a semi-global variable, but it's a class, you know, if you think about it in terms of like fields and things like that, that would be fine. But we're going to keep it, and we're going to be able to use it in multiple pieces. And I think I like that the best at this point. So now all of a sudden we have all these things available to us. And we're going to take the test, and every time we come in here, and since these are all setups, let's put it down here, keeping our initializations and our declarations together, and I'm going to just say test dot add and then whatever's in that text box that we used. So in this case, we call our text box grade. So let's go ahead and put in grade. And remember, grade is what? It's a string, right? So we have to convert this grade. That's why we're going to get this number. So how do we do that before? Well, we just took, or rather parsed, this piece. So let's go ahead and say double. Parse, oops. And then grade dot text, if I can spell right, and semicolon. Oh no, I just realized something. We called this guy grade, right? Well, we already had a variable called grade, so what should we do? I'm going to change it in the form. We're going to call this, we could call it a big G. Why don't we call it input delete grade? Give it a good name. And now we can go back in there and do that. And it's likable. So every time that you click that button, it's going to add another test to the another grade to the test. And how do we solve for this? Well, let's wait for this. Let's no, that's all right. We'll do that. Okay, so now we've kind of built this, and we're just going to trust this. If you want to go ahead and label this out, you can use message boxes and put it in a list box, whatever, just to make sure we're going to do it. But I'm pretty confident that it will add this. So if we have two grades in there, test is going to be of dimension, or it'll have two elements in it. That's as smart as we can say it. So when we want to solve for the average, because remember essentially we want to get back to this, right? Average is equal to compute average, but before we had the three tests in here, correct? Now what we want is, well, we don't have to even put any tests because test is up there in the field. So we can delete that. And to be honest, I don't even want this denominator in here because we're not dividing by 3, right? We are just going to go to compute average, strip all of this stuff out, and we don't need a denominator. We don't need the tests. All that we have to do is solve for this average. And remember, this is a different average, but we're going to pass it back in the return average section, so we're fine. And let's say, how do we solve for it? Well, we know that we have an infinite amount of tests, right? So what we could do is loop through each one of these tests. And we could say something to the effect of double, and then sum, maybe for now. And then we're going to say down here, we could say for int I equals 0, semicolon, I less than or equal to test.count, because you remember this is one of our one of our properties of our lists. And we're going to go I plus plus. Now for each one of these, we could say that sum, and actually, you know what? I'm going to say sum is equal to 0. I'm since I'm very old school and I've been programming for a while, I'm always scared that these guys are not going to initialize right and we're going to have some like super large number. We could say 0.0. That would be fine, maybe. And now I can say sum plus equal test I. Right? So plus equals means what? We're going to add, this is essentially saying the same as sum is equal to sum plus test, right? That's basically it. And it's going to loop through every one of the tests that I put into. So if I get 100, let's say I have 100 and a 90, the first time it's going to go through, it's going to say sum is plus equal, well, sum is 0, test is equal to 100, because that's the new test we're putting in, and the total sum is going to be 100. Then it's going to go to I is equal to 1, and this is the kind of the beauty of starting everything at 0. Arrays start at 0, and we start our loop at 0, so our index is going to match up with I. Okay, so then when we go to I is equal to 1, that's the new test, which was 90, and it's going to, the sum is now 100, so it's going to be 100 plus 90. So it just takes a nice running sum. And when we pop out of that loop, guess what? We can just put the word sum right here, where before we had to actually manually add those. We can get rid of this double, because we no longer have to worry about what denominator is and what test says, because we've labeled everything as doubles. And the denominator is, guess what? Test.count. And what I would probably like to do here is a test.count is a going to come back as an integer. So what I would prefer to do is actually go ahead and turn it into a double right here. And if you don't remember how to do it, this is it, which is kind of a short form way of doing it. Because what we're generally, I like to put this into a variable, but this should work. It'll change it into a double, and then we'll allow it. And then labeled output text already is there, so we can set it equal to. We haven't activated any of the other feedback, but let's worry about that later on. And to be honest, I think we could almost do it now and get it, but let's just test here, because I don't want to test too much at once. So let's hit start. And if, like we said before, I'm going to put in the 100. I'm going to hit test, even though we haven't actually activated this yet. And I'm going to hit compute. It says not all grades were entered. Oh no, I just realized something playing with this. All right. Don't do that, because now it goes from 0 to 1. It was going to 0. And the count was 2, so it's going to 0 to 2. So let's give this another try. And we'll go 100. Compute, your average is 100. And if we do 90, the average of 90 plus 100 is going to be 190, but divided by 2 is going to be 95. So let's do that. And sure enough, it's 95. If I were to do an 80, 80 plus 90 plus 100 is going to give you 270. Divided by 3 is 90. So let's go ahead and check that out. Good. Now we actually have a working one, and we can just keep adding to it. It's no longer limited to 3 grades. So in other words, we could put in 78. This is going to mess it up a little bit. But as you can see, it comes in, and we're still good. 66. Compute. We're keeping that nice average going. And that's it. That is how we're going to do it. That's for the test. Now the next step we're going to do is going into the homework. What I think I'll do is I want to show you something else with lists that is terribly useful for lists and arrays. So what I'd like to do is show you that first, and then we'll kind of come back in, play a little more, and then we're going to start to work in these, integrate these other parts. All right. Thank you.